Hello, how you doing? My name is Daniel Duwa. Welcome to another electrifying episode of the 5 Next Steps show. In this installment, we have the distinct honor of featuring Meg Whitman, former CEO of Hewlett-Packard and eBay, a tech pioneer and the current American ambassador to Kenya. As a climate warrior, shared an invaluable perspective on climate opportunities and the future. Get ready for an episode brimming with wisdom and foresight from one of the most distinct voices in business and diplomatic spheres.
I think carbon capture is not that well understood by average people, and so I'll come back to that in a moment. If I sort of go up to 10,000 feet here or 50,000 feet, I think one of the things that needs to happen in Africa is the changing of the narrative of what goes on in Africa and what goes on in Kenya. I can tell you, as the CEO of Hewlett-Packard and the CEO of eBay, I spend about 1% of my time thinking about Africa. But it is the continent of the future, and if you're going to invest in any country in Africa right now, Kenya is the place to go. So I've been working very hard on changing that narrative. And that brings me to what I think is perhaps the role that you all play here. I believe that, in fact, for the continent as a whole, but also for Kenya, this has to be about job creation. Jobs, 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 more jobs, good jobs, high-paying jobs, jobs that are in the formal sector. It doesn't mean that the informal sector is not important, it is, but ultimately this continent and Kenya has to industrialize like the rest of the world has. And if that doesn't happen, this will be a very challenging situation in 2050 when there is double the number of people on the continent. So how does one go about thinking about that? I'm all about focus. Could we please focus on 3 things as opposed to literally solve world hunger, which is now my new bailiwick in some ways. First is technology, and I'm going to come back to you all in a minute, but technology. This is already happening. I'm a big believer, if something's already happening, double down on it. This really is the Silicon Savannah of Africa. It is the leader, you all are the leader in tech here, and you should be the leader in tech on the entire continent. And then apparel, a big idea. When I first came here, people said you can go from agriculture to digital. You don't need to sort of stop along the way in manufacturing. I don't think that's actually true, because the number of employees per dollar of revenue of a Google is teeny relative to the number of employees per dollar of revenue of a manufacturing organization. And so apparel, I think, is a big idea here. There's no question that agriculture needs to be modernized. But I think the thing that is most interesting to you is climate, conservation, green is a really big opportunity for Kenya. Sometimes in life it's better to be lucky than smart. And the fact that geothermal is 65% of your energy that is truly renewable, and now nicely complemented by wind and solar. I mean, there's no better, I think there's not a country better positioned in the world maybe than Kenya. And that's part of the story that I'm trying to tell to America. And maybe some of you have seen my talk on why Africa, why Kenya, and it's actually working. Amazingly, it's actually working. We're getting tremendous number of inquiries, much more than we ever had in the embassy on American investment that wants to come here. So, as I think about what you're doing here, we have to make sure that every company that deserves it is well funded. In the end, you have to have well-funded startups, and you can work your way into it. But if you don't have the money, it's really, really difficult. I think let's tell the story of Kenya. Let's tell the story of carbon capture. It's an exciting story. I don't think it's well understood. And carbon capture and storage, by the way, and all the industries that have to be built to support that. Every company now is thinking about how to diversify their supply chain, and I think that's important for this industry. And then last but not least, I would say, don't forget about the government. The government in many ways it's important in America as well, but you can actually, without engaging, we went for years without engaging with the government in the tech sector, turned out to bite us a little bit, but here you cannot. So don't forget about the government. Those are just a few thoughts off the top of my head. I will say one last thing, because you asked me, is interestingly, this industry, I was thinking about it this morning, this industry reminds me of the earliest days of the computer industry. Where the power of your cell phone was actually in a room like this, filled with computers. And everyone thought it wasn't going to work. It was way out of people's reach in terms of price. Only the biggest companies could, afford those first IBM 360s. And it also reminds me of the early airplane industry. Everyone thought, these are never going to fly. What are you thinking? Like, this is never going to happen. Henry Ford, it's very well known that everyone said, horseless carriage, never happening. Never happening. And by the way, even if you could get that to work, what are you going to do about roads? It's all dirt roads. And what are you going to do about the gasoline stations? Because there was no infrastructure. And so you just have to remember that you guys are on the forefront of a completely new industry. And I was too in the internet, but it was a little bit easier, frankly, than what you're doing. And but you just got to keep going. You've got to be resilient, and you've got to you can't listen to the naysayers, because it's like a bummer. And I remember when I took eBay public, I can't tell you the number of investors I met with who said, this will never work. This will never work. Let me make sure I understand this. You're going to connect buyers and sellers 3,000 miles across the country. The buyer's going to win an auction. No one buys at auction. And they're going to send money to someone they've never met on the other side of the country and hope they get the product? I don't think so. And they were really sorry they did not invest. So just remember those stories. And it's great fun to be on the forefront of an industry, but it's also really hard. It's really hard, and a lot of resilience. But I honestly think this could be the car industry, it could be the airplane industry, it could be the computer industry. I mean, this could be in society there's these giant jump changes that changes everything, and I think this is one of those industries. So, congratulations.
As we conclude this episode of 5 Next Steps by Daniel Duwa Show, we extend our deepest gratitude for you tuning in. Meg's profound insights delivered at the luncheon have undoubtedly left a mark on our understanding of climate opportunity. In the spirit of brevity, we condense Meg's impactful speech for time consideration. But for those of you who are hungry for a more incisive experience, I've left a link for a compelling talk that Meg did that's called Why Africa? Why Kenya? It awaits you on the show notes. Dive deeper into the narratives that drive change and continue your journey towards empowerment with the 5 Next Steps show. Thank you ever so much. And until next time, stay inspired, stay motivated, and keep taking those next steps towards your dreams. Bye-bye.